In the quiet darkness before dawn, Japanese forces patrolling the Solomon waters believed the night belonged entirely to them. Their warships moved with confidence, certain no American vessel could slip through unobserved. Yet somewhere beyond the faint glow of their searchlights, a single lost PT boat drifted off course, and within minutes, it would alter the entire battle they thought they controlled. The Solomon Islands had become a labyrinth of shifting tides, narrow channels, and nighttime encounters that unfolded under the dim glow of the moon. Japanese commanders believed they understood this environment better than any opponent. Their warships navigated with practiced precision, their spotters accustomed to detecting the smallest ripples that hinted at approaching threats. For months, they had dominated the night battles across these waters, relying on disciplined formations and coordinated maneuvers to maintain control. American PT boats, small and agile but lightly armored, had attempted to challenge this dominance. They darted through the channels at high speed, launching torpedo attacks whenever opportunities arose. Yet their successes were inconsistent, and losses remained frequent. Japanese gunners often regarded these vessels as little more than fast-moving nuisances, dangerous when coordinated, but vulnerable when isolated. On this particular night, however, the sea held an unexpected twist. A single PT boat, separated from its squadron during a sharp evasive maneuver, drifted far off its intended course. Engine trouble, combined with unpredictable currents, had carried the vessel into a sector patrolled heavily by Japanese destroyers. The crew remained alert yet uncertain of their exact position, relying on faint silhouettes of islands and the shifting breeze to orient themselves. Aboard the Japanese flagship leading the patrol, officers scanned the waters with calm confidence. Their formation moved steadily, engines pulsing with synchronized rhythm. Spotters scanned the darkness, searching for the telltale wake of torpedo boats or the glow of engines reflecting off the waves. Nothing appeared unusual. To them, this night felt like countless others, predictable, controlled, and firmly within Japanese hands. Yet the PT boat's unexpected presence would disrupt that certainty. Its crew, aware of the danger yet determined to avoid detection, navigated cautiously through open patches of moonlit water. Every movement carried the weight of risk, and yet each second also presented a chance for survival. They did not know that their position placed them directly in the path of a Japanese formation preparing for a coordinated sweep. Within minutes, a single misinterpreted sound, a faint engine fluctuation, or a misread silhouette would trigger a chain reaction that shifted the momentum of the night. Neither side could foresee how the encounter would unfold, or how one lost PT boat, meant to be insignificant, would alter an entire battle shaped by shadows and silence. The PT boat had begun the night as part of a coordinated patrol meant to intercept Japanese transport vessels rumored to be moving reinforcements through narrow island channels. The American crews had grown familiar with these waters, though familiarity never fully diminished the tension that accompanied nighttime operations. Islands appeared as shifting silhouettes, currents tugged unpredictably at the hull, and moonlight created illusions of movement where none existed. Shortly after midnight, the PT squadron encountered a situation that forced rapid improvisation. A sudden burst of enemy searchlights swept across the water as Japanese destroyers emerged unexpectedly from a concealed approach vector. The American boats split formation instantly, each one executing sharp, evasive maneuvers to avoid the converging beams of light and the gunfire that followed. Amid the chaos, one PT boat found itself isolated, pushed into a current that carried it far from its intended course. The crew worked quickly to regain orientation. The skipper monitored compass readings while listening to the engine's uneven rhythm, aware that one cylinder had begun misfiring after the earlier evasive turn. The radio man attempted to re-establish communication with the rest of the squadron, but received only static, likely due to interference from the island terrain. The boat continued drifting southeast, its crew adjusting course cautiously to avoid revealing their presence. The night air carried the scent of salt and distant rain. Low clouds obscured parts of the moon, causing the sea to alternate between glowing silver and dissolving into near-total darkness. The crew relied heavily on sound, distant engine rumbles, shifting waves, and the wind brushing across the water surface. Every sensory detail became essential for survival. As they continued forward, they noticed faint vibrations beneath the hull, the subtle signature of deeper currents pushing them toward a broader channel used frequently by Japanese patrols. The skipper considered cutting the engine entirely to reduce their acoustic signature, yet doing so risked surrendering control to the tide. Instead, he operated at the lowest feasible speed, balancing mobility with stealth. The crew maintained disciplined silence, communicating with gestures refined over months of nighttime operations. They listened intently for the distant pulse of large engines, the kind that belonged to destroyers, cruisers, or transports. For several minutes, the night remained quiet, broken only by the soft churn of their own engine and the hiss of waves against the bow. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, the water began reflecting a faint rhythmic glow. The crew recognized it immediately. The muted, pulsing light emitted from Japanese ships preparing to alter course. These movements often preceded coordinated actions, and the PT boat had drifted dangerously close to the edge of a patrol formation. The skipper ordered the crew to reduce visibility further, dimming internal lights and instructing the gunners to stand ready without creating silhouettes. They scanned the horizon, where the faint outlines of multiple warships now appeared. The Japanese formation moved with practiced cohesion, their destroyers aligned in a sweeping arc designed to detect intruders. The PT boat, still partially obscured by darkness, remained undetected for the moment. Yet its proximity to the formation placed it at the center of a developing tactical shift. The Japanese ships, interpreting slight disturbances in the water ahead, began adjusting their pattern, unknowingly responding to the presence of the lost American vessel. What began as a drifting mistake was becoming the fulcrum of an unfolding encounter. The Japanese formation moved steadily through the channel, its destroyers maintaining disciplined intervals shaped by months of coordination in these waters. Their engines created a low, rhythmic pulse that drifted across the surface in measured waves. Officers aboard the lead destroyer scanned the darkness with a confidence rooted in familiarity. To them, this sector represented another routine sweep, one they believed posed minimal threat. Yet subtle irregularities around them hinted at a shift too faint for immediate recognition. The first sign came as a faint ripple across the starboard side of the formation. It appeared insignificant at first, no more than a small disturbance in the water that could have been produced by an errant current. But the Japanese spotter paused, studying the movement with the careful eye of someone trained to distinguish the natural from the deliberate. The ripple faded quickly, leaving only calm water behind. Yet it triggered a moment of internal calculation. He reported the observation quietly, and the commanding officer gave a measured nod. They adjusted their searchlights, sweeping them across a broader arc. The beams illuminated a trembling curtain of spray, but revealed nothing concrete. The formation continued forward, but the officer in charge interpreted the disturbance as a possible indication of nearby American activity. In recent weeks, PT boats had attempted increasingly bold attacks under cover of darkness, and the Japanese crews had grown cautious. What the Japanese officers did not realize was that the ripple had been caused by the PT boat's attempt to correct its drifting course. The skipper, aware of how close they were to the destroyers, had adjusted the rudder slightly, creating the subtle disturbance that momentarily caught the spotter's attention. The movement had been minute, barely enough to maintain control, but in the stillness of the night, even the smallest motion could carry unintended consequences. Aboard the PT boat, the crew sensed that their proximity to the Japanese formation had grown dangerously close. The skipper instructed the engineer to vary engine output just enough to maintain momentum without creating a wake that could reveal their position. These delicate adjustments strained the already faltering engine, which responded with uneven pulses that vibrated through the hull. Each vibration felt amplified by the weight of uncertainty pressing upon the crew. The radio man, unable to re-establish communication, monitored faint static patterns through his headset, hoping that a recognizable signal might emerge. But the island masses around them acted like natural walls, blocking transmissions and leaving them effectively isolated. The night pressed upon them with a heaviness that carried both danger and hesitation. Without external guidance, the crew relied entirely on instinct and observation. As the Japanese destroyers pressed forward, their formation widened slightly, creating an envelope of sweeping arcs designed to catch incoming torpedo boats. The officers on board interpreted the earlier ripple as a possible indicator of American scouts nearby. They adjusted their lookout positions and prepared to redirect gun crews should confirmation arise. The sense of calm began giving way to heightened readiness. Yet another misinterpretation soon followed. The PT boat's engines sputtered momentarily as the misfiring cylinders struggled to maintain balance. The sound was faint, muffled by distance and the masking noise of waves. But aboard one Japanese destroyer, a young officer believed he detected a low-frequency anomaly resembling the signature of a small American craft. He reported it immediately. The commander, already suspicious from the earlier ripple, treated the report with seriousness. In his mind, the two unusual signs formed a pattern. He ordered the formation to tighten and adjust course, an action that shifted the destroyers into a sweeping search pattern that inadvertently narrowed the channel ahead. This maneuver would have made perfect tactical sense had a coordinated American PT squadron been approaching. Yet the only vessel in their path was the drifting PT boat, hidden in darkness and unprepared for the magnitude of the reaction it had just triggered. Unbeknownst to the Japanese officers, the PT boat's position now placed it at the exact intersection of their new pattern. Their attempt to intercept a presumed threat brought them closer to the very vessel they had not yet identified. The American crew, sensing movement but unaware of its cause, prepared for the possibility of sudden illumination. Between ripples, engine vibrations, and minute course corrections, a sequence of misunderstandings had begun to take shape. Misunderstandings that would soon escalate into a pivotal turning point none of them had intended. The Japanese destroyers continued tightening their search pattern, their prows cutting through the dark water with deliberate precision. Each vessel shifted position according to the commander's revised interpretation of the faint signs detected earlier. What had begun as small anomalies, the ripple, the distant sputter, were now treated as indicators of an approaching American PT squadron. This belief, though incorrect, influenced every subsequent movement of the formation. From the elevated vantage point of the flagship's bridge, officers studied the shifting reflections of moonlight on the water. They looked for the characteristic wake pattern that small torpedo boats left when maneuvering at moderate speed. The sea, however, offered nothing clear. Its surface shimmered gently under alternating patches of cloud and moonlight, creating illusions of movement that led to more questions than answers. Still, the commander believed the threat was real. American PT boats had become increasingly aggressive in recent weeks, launching nighttime raids that disrupted Japanese operations. Their agility and torpedo capability made them dangerous despite their fragility, and the Japanese crews had learned not to underestimate them, especially in narrow island channels where visibility was limited. Meanwhile, the drifting PT boat remained unaware of the full extent of the Japanese reaction. The crew sensed only that destroyers were drawing closer. The skipper strained to interpret faint engine vibrations echoing across the water. The turbulence generated by large vessels revealed their general direction, but not their precise bearings. The PT boat's tiny silhouette blended with the shadows of the coastline, a fact that offered small comfort amid rising tension. Inside the boat, the crew communicated through quiet gestures. The forward gunner signaled readiness, though he knew firing would be suicidal unless detection was unavoidable. The radio man removed his headset briefly, rubbing fatigue from his eyes before returning to the faint static that still carried no coherent signal. The engineer monitored the struggling engine, adjusting power in small increments that maintained forward motion while masking noise. As the Japanese formation advanced, one destroyer activated a low-power searchlight sweep, not bright enough to reveal its own position to distant observers, but strong enough to cast faint illumination across patches of water. The beam brushed past the PT boat's location without revealing it, yet it produced a momentary gleam off a distant wave crest. The officer controlling the light interpreted the reflection as potential movement. Moments later, another officer on the flagship reported what he believed to be a wake fragment ahead. In truth, the pattern he observed was the natural convergence of two opposing currents, but within the heightened state of vigilance, it aligned too neatly with the presumed threat. The commander, interpreting the signals collectively, concluded that American PT boats were preparing an attack. He ordered the destroyers to accelerate and fan out, creating a triangular formation ideal for intercepting fast-moving small craft. The sudden shift caused deeper vibrations in the water, vibrations that reached the PT boat and rattled lightly through its hull. The skipper of the PT boat froze momentarily, recognizing that large ships had accelerated nearby. He signaled his crew to reduce their own speed even further. The PT boat slowed enough that its bow barely cut the surface, allowing it to blend into the stillness between the rippling movements generated by the destroyers. Then came the illusion that changed everything. A school of fish, startled by the converging destroyers, broke the surface in a quick burst of chaotic motion. Their sudden movement produced a wake-like pattern, sharp, angular, and inconsistent. Yet in the low light and from a distance, it resembled the torpedo launch signature of a PT boat accelerating into position. The Japanese spotter, already convinced of a nearby threat, reported the sighting emphatically. Believing an attack was imminent, the commander ordered the destroyers to open suppressive fire into the assumed approach vector. Seconds later, heavy naval guns roared into the night. The PT boat crew watched in stunned silence as shells splashed into the water hundreds of yards ahead of them. The Japanese destroyers, firing at nothing more than a mistaken illusion, revealed their exact positions to American aircraft patrolling several miles away. What began as a misunderstanding had just transformed into a strategic error, one that would rapidly escalate as the battle continued to unfold. The thunder of Japanese gunfire rolled across the channel, echoing against the silhouettes of distant islands. Each destroyer repeated the suppressive barrage, convinced that American PT boats were advancing under the cover of darkness. Water erupted in tall columns where shells struck, sending ripples coursing outward in every direction. Yet no American boats occupied the targeted zone. Only the startled school of fish whose frantic movement had first triggered the illusion. From the bridge of the flagship, officers tracked the splashes with intense concentration. They believed the shells were falling near the evasive maneuvers of enemy boats. The commander, interpreting the pattern of impacts as confirmation of American activity, ordered the formation to widen and intensify fire. The destroyers complied immediately, illuminating sections of the water with rapid flashes from their guns. But beneath the chaos, a subtle shift began unfolding, one with consequences far greater than the Japanese officers anticipated. American aircraft patrolling several miles away detected the sudden light signatures piercing the night. For hours, they had scanned the waters without finding clear targets, but the gunfire now revealed the precise positions of multiple Japanese destroyers. The pilots, startled at first, quickly radioed the coordinates to their command group. Unknown to the Japanese formation, their mistaken suppression fire had just exposed them to a threat they had hoped to avoid. Below, the drifting PT boat remained dangerously close to the formation, yet completely unnoticed. The crew watched in disbelief as destroyers fired into empty water, unaware that their weapons were revealing them to American reconnaissance planes. The skipper, piecing together the pattern, realized with growing clarity that the Japanese believed they were already under attack. He motioned for the engineer to maintain the engine at minimal speed. The PT boat moved scarcely faster than the tide, blending into the quiet void between searchlight sweeps and bursts of gunfire. Each explosion illuminated patches of water that shimmered briefly before fading into darkness, leaving the PT boat hidden in the shifting shadows. As the Japanese destroyers continued firing, their formation grew increasingly stretched. Ships adjusted independently to perceived threats, creating gaps that weakened their coordinated defensive pattern. Officers shouted new bearings and adjusted angles of fire, their discipline giving way to confusion. The commander attempted to reassert control, ordering the formation to tighten once more. But the conflicting reports from spotters made cohesive movement difficult. Meanwhile, the American reconnaissance planes transmitted updates to nearby strike aircraft preparing an early morning assault on Japanese naval positions. The PT boat's unexpected presence had caused enough disturbance to spark the Japanese reaction, and now that reaction had inadvertently synchronized with American attack timing. The destroyers, illuminated by their own gunfire, had become prime targets. Aboard one Japanese destroyer near the edge of the formation, a lookout spotted faint aircraft silhouettes crossing the moonlit sky. At first, he believed them to be shadows cast by clouds, but as the shapes grew clearer, a chill of recognition spread through him. He shouted a warning to the bridge. Moments later, the commander received confirmation that American aircraft were approaching rapidly. With the realization came a wave of disbelief. The Japanese officers struggled to comprehend how their disciplined formation, navigating familiar waters under the cover of night, had somehow become exposed. They had prepared for PT boats, not an early aerial assault. Yet their own gunfire had served as a beacon across the vast dark sea. The PT boat crew, still unnoticed, sensed the shift through sound alone. The droning of distant aircraft reached their ears, faint but unmistakable. They exchanged glances, understanding that events were unfolding far beyond their control. The boat, drifting silently between converging forces, had inadvertently changed the trajectory of the entire engagement. As the Japanese commander scrambled to redirect guns skyward, the PT boat continued slipping through the darkness, still unseen, still drifting, and still influencing the unfolding night in ways no one aboard could have predicted. The American aircraft closed the distance with growing speed, their engines humming through the night in steady resonance. Pilots peered through the dim glow of the horizon, adjusting course as radio operators relayed the precise coordinates illuminated earlier by Japanese gunfire. They had expected a difficult search through darkness and cloud cover. Yet now the enemy vessels revealed themselves with every burst of their own weapons. The approaching pilots recognized the rare advantage. Surprise was firmly in their hands. Meanwhile, aboard the Japanese destroyers, officers struggled to reorient their crews. The abrupt need to redirect guns skyward disrupted the coordinated pattern they had maintained moments earlier. Searchlights, once sweeping the surface for fast-moving boats, jerked upward in disjointed motions as crews attempted to locate the incoming aircraft. The transition from anti-boat to anti-air posture created pockets of uncertainty across the formation, each gun crew grappling with shifting angles and hurried commands. Through this rising turmoil, the PT boat remained a quiet anomaly that had unwittingly set the chain reaction into motion. Still drifting between the gaps in the destroyer formation, it occupied a pocket of darkness untouched by searchlights. The vessel floated silently as the Japanese ships pivoted toward the sky, leaving the sea's surface briefly neglected. The crew watched with a mixture of awe and apprehension, aware that the next moments would shape the night's final outcome. The first American dive bomber emerged from the haze, its silhouette descending sharply toward the largest destroyer in the Japanese line. The aircraft released its ordnance with precise timing, and a sharp explosion erupted near the destroyer's bow. The blast sent a column of spray arching high above the deck and rattled the formation with sudden force. Officers aboard the flagship shouted urgent commands, their earlier sense of control dissolving under the weight of the unexpected assault. Another aircraft followed, then another, each one using the intermittent glow of anti-aircraft fire to identify its target. The Japanese destroyers fired upward in frantic patterns, attempting to establish a defensive rhythm, but the tight coordination they normally relied upon had fractured. Their guns, once synchronized with near-perfect discipline, now responded unevenly to the overlapping demands of surface and aerial engagement. The PT boat's crew felt each explosion ripple through the water beneath them. Despite the danger, the skipper recognized the opportunity created by the chaos. He maneuvered the faltering engine just enough to edge the boat into a shadow cast by a steep island ridge. The movement was slow and deliberate, minimizing noise while still allowing the PT boat to slip steadily away from the center of the Japanese formation. High above, American aircraft adjusted their attack runs based on the destroyer's scattered responses. The Japanese ships attempted evasive maneuvers, yet their earlier misinterpretations had caused them to spread into positions that hindered teamwork. As shells burst in the sky and water erupted in sprays, gaps widened between ships, making them vulnerable to sequential attacks. Amid the tightening circle of aerial pressure, Japanese commanders grappled with disbelief. They had prepared for a hidden enemy approaching from the surface, not an aerial force exploiting their own gunfire as guidance. The realization struck some officers with particular force. None of these developments would have occurred had the initial misinterpretations not taken root. The PT boat, barely functioning and drifting into the protective shadow of a rocky coastline, became a silent witness to the unraveling of a formation once praised for its precision. Its crew listened as the thunder of explosions echoed across the channel, each one marking a moment of escalating consequence. They had not fired a shot, yet their unintended presence had redirected the entire battle. What began as a navigational mistake had transformed into a catalyst, one that shifted strategic momentum in ways no planner on either side could have anticipated. As dawn approached, the echoes of the night's engagement faded slowly into the humid air. Smoke drifted across the water in suspended layers, illuminated faintly by the rising sun. Japanese destroyers, once moving with flawless coordination, now traversed the channel in scattered clusters. Some bore visible damage along their decks or bows. Others limped through the water with diminished speed. Their commanders, fatigued and shaken, attempted to regroup while confronting the bewildering chain of events that had derailed their operation. American aircraft circled overhead, marking the final stages of their assault before returning to base. Their reconnaissance confirmed that the earlier barrage, triggered by illusions and misinterpretations, had exposed the Japanese formation far earlier than any American strategist could have planned. The chance alignment of timing, confusion, and reaction had created an opportunity that shifted the balance of the night entirely. Near the shadowed ridge along the coastline, the PT boat finally came to a near halt. Its engines sputtered into silence as the crew allowed the vessel to drift into the shallow, sheltered water. Exhausted yet alert, they scanned the horizon, absorbing the magnitude of what had occurred. They had not engaged the enemy. They had not fired torpedoes or exchanged gunfire. Yet their unintended presence had shaped the course of the entire encounter. The skipper reflected quietly on the series of moments that had unfolded. The drifting course, the engine's uneven pulse, the ripple mistaken for a signature wake. Each event had been insignificant on its own, but layered atop one another, they created a narrative interpreted through the lens of Japanese expectations. The enemy saw what they feared rather than what existed, and in doing so, they revealed themselves to forces waiting just beyond the horizon. Word of the engagement spread quickly in the following days. American officers spoke of the unexpected advantage created by Japanese overreaction, while intelligence analysts pieced together reports that highlighted the catalyst behind the event. Japanese accounts later revealed the bewilderment felt by commanders who believed they had detected a coordinated PT boat attack, only to realize that the threat had never materialized. For the PT boat crew, the experience became a story not of bold action, but of quiet significance. A reminder that in war, outcomes can hinge not only on decisive strikes, but also on misread signals, subtle movements, and the unpredictable interplay of fear and perception. The PT boat had been lost, yet in being lost, it had changed everything. If you enjoyed this documentary and want to discover more untold stories from World War II, make sure to subscribe to WW2 Chronicle Vault. Your support helps us bring history back to life, one forgotten story at a time.